Today on Locked On Canadiens, after a 6-1 loss in St. Louis, you all probably have a different player to blame, and guess what? The good news is you're probably right.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1274 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you do not miss an episode. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and that every day sometimes comes after a really, really embarrassing loss when the team needed a win more than anything. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as Maybe It's Ian. I'm not joined once again by Laura Saba. She's still traveling, jet setting around the world, so you're riding solo with me today. And hey, look, that was a bad game against St. Louis. I could go full yelly, screamy guy. I don't really know that the moment calls for that. I think the vibe around this is more I'm not angry, I'm disappointed in a way. So I think that's where we'll sort of take things today. We'll start by covering the game, and then we'll break down some of the finer points of the conversations that I think are happening amongst Habs fans right now, and try to get a feeling of whether or not they're based in reality, or if we're all just in our feelings, which is a valid answer regardless. And then I have some thoughts on the fourth line, who I think are kind of flying under the radar as far as criticism goes as of late, and I kind of want to key in on them as an opportunity for the Canadiens to improve. But let's start on Tuesday night in St. Louis. Look, Montreal from the get-go was not good enough in this game. The Blues had the first 10 or 11 shots and the first power play. The Canadiens had no shots through 11 minutes. Their first shot was actually a clear on the penalty kill. I believe it was Yoel Armia just dumped it down the ice and it went on goal, and Binnington had to touch it, so it was a shot on goal. That should have, now that I'm looking back on it, that should have just been an indication that was the tone of the game, right? I mean, they had nothing going in that first period, and throughout the game, that tone kind of carried through the rest of the game. The Blues score first. It's a shot through traffic. Montembeault really had no shot at it, but it's okay because they scored seconds later. Nick Suzuki tips home a Lane Hutson shot. That is the only positive. Well, there's some others that I can point out, but the only real positive in this one was that Nick Suzuki finds another point, and so does Lane Hutson. He threw it at the net, and it was deflected by Nick Suzuki. That is point number 54 for Lane Hutson. He needs 11 more to pass Chris Chelios for the record of most points by a defenseman in their rookie season for the Montreal Canadiens. So still within range. There's 12 games left now, and he needs 11 points, so he needs to be point per game Lane in order for that to happen. But look, if he gets that, he's going to have deserved the title of the greatest rookie defenseman in Montreal Canadiens history, because we're headed in that direction. Other than that, I think it was a tough night for the pairing of Matheson and Carrier. We'll kind of talk about them a little bit more in the second segment. So I don't want to go too deep in there because they're going to get their play later on. I do want to talk about Cole Caulfield though to start. I know he got an assist on that first goal, but it just seems like he is in an absolute funk right now. The puck isn't sitting flat for him. It's not necessarily that he's playing poorly. I don't think that line is playing poorly. I think they're just being outmatched most nights. The Blues, and when they played the Islanders and when they played the Avalanche for times during those games, the opposition, the goal was to give Montreal no time and space to do anything. I think they recognize that the Canadiens are pretty good at skating the puck out of trouble. And if they just give them nowhere to skate, they won't have anything to do with it. And I think that hurts the first line, especially because all three of those guys skate pretty well. Even, Slavkovsky's no slouch, even though, the size that he is. Suzuki's more of a methodical skater, as is Caulfield. They're, both really great on their edges. But they're not burners like, say, an Alex Newhook, who in a game like this against the Blues and against the Islanders and against the Sens last week and against the Avalanche, Newhook has been able to use his speed 2 to 3 times a game to create some kind of scoring chance. He's still doing that. He did it pretty well against the Blues. But I find it so funny. He's got, I think, 2 points in his last 9, now 10 games. And I think this is a moment where the puck does in fact lie. Because he's been great. I've really liked Alex Newhook's play. He's using his speed, he's generating chances, he's getting to the net. At times in this game against St. Louis, he was one of Montreal's only bright spots up front. One of the only guys who was able to, I guess, I don't want to say consistently create offense, but able to create more than one opportunity to score, which is not saying a lot considering what the rest of the team was able or really unable to do in the 60 minutes against the St. Louis Blues. There's another trend I kind of want to mention here, in that I think the Canadiens really struggle against goaltenders who really want to play the puck. And we saw it against Calgary, their only other regulation loss since the Four Nations break, when Dustin Wolf was just going around the back of the net and cutting the puck off. It stops the Canadiens from doing anything on their forecheck. And the largest criticism I have against Marty at this point this season is that when that doesn't work, they don't have a plan B. They do not adjust. They just keep chipping the puck in and trying to generate from their forecheck, getting in there and getting down low and stealing the puck. And one thing we'll talk about in the third segment, one of their key drivers for that kind of play is the fourth line, and they haven't been very good. And they're banged up. We know Army is not playing healthy right now. But that might be a reason why, that in a game, even where a guy like Jordan Binnington is playing the puck a ton, even if he is, you would hope that a line like the fourth line would be able to get down low and create chaos. Same with the third line. I thought the third line generated some good scoring in transition, some good offense in transition, but they weren't able to get the puck in deep and try to go to work the way that they want to. So it's a real challenge. And I think that the problem is that the Blues are built like a team that the Canadiens should, expect to see in the playoffs. They play a style, and they're built just roster construction wise like a team that is built to go deep into the playoffs. Yeah, they struggled through most of the year, and they're really just picking it up now. They're the hottest team in the National Hockey League. The problem is we've seen that story before with that franchise, with that goalie, with a lot of the core that's still there. That it doesn't matter that they're down, and that they're at one point they were 8 points out of a playoff spot. They're the hottest team in the league right now, and they're hot at the time that you want to be. The Montreal Canadiens were hot for a time, and now it's very obvious that they are cooling off. And I hope that this game acts as a wake-up call. That, when the puck drops on Thursday against Philadelphia, you need to be ready. Philadelphia lost 7-2 to the Toronto Maple Leafs at the same time that the Canadiens game was starting, or in the middle of that game. So they're going to come in and be angry. That's going to be, I think, a very nasty hockey game on Thursday. It was the last time these two teams played each other. But it's this game against the Blues is a great measuring stick for where this Canadiens team is as they're currently built. And they don't have it. If they don't have it on any given night, if they're not 100%, firing on all cylinders, 6-1 is what's going to happen to you. They're a flawed hockey team. They don't have a ton of depth outside of what's in their lineup. There's really no other options to call in at this point. On defense, we're hoping Caden Gooley is able to step back into the lineup at some point in the near future. But there's no reinforcements coming at forward unless they call up Owen Beck again, because right now it's just Michael Pezzetta sitting in the press box. So the Montreal Canadiens, they need to take this lesson. They need to take their lumps. It doesn't matter if they lost 1-0 or 6-1. It's still just one loss in the score sheet on the scoreboard. And in the standings, most importantly, I know that the Buffalo Sabres defeated Ottawa in regulation, so the Canadiens got some help there. As I am recording this, I believe the Colorado Avalanche are up on the Detroit Red Wings by a score of 3-1. And you will already know the result of that game and of the Rangers Kings game that's taking place on Tuesday night. Montreal could get some help here. They haven't gotten a ton of it in the last little while. I still think one of the funniest outcomes of Tuesday night and Wednesday, for what it's worth, is that every team trying to win a playoff spot in the Eastern Conference loses. I think that's it's entirely likely at this point. I mean, half of them have already lost, and it's just a matter of can the others follow suit and try to lose to keep pace with the rest of that conference. So we'll leave the main topic of the game behind us, but I want to dig deeper onto a few players here. In our second segment, we'll touch on the Mike Matheson game, and we'll touch on Sam Montembeault, who I think has been struggling a little bit as of late, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Let me guess, you just realized you needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page, and it helps you find the right candidates faster. I've been in that spot where I needed to hire immediately, and the pressure's on, and every day where you don't have the right person, it feels like a setback. You're falling behind in your day-to-day tasks, and you need somebody to be able to step in and help. That's exactly when Indeed sponsored jobs comes in handy. They make sure your post is seen by the right candidates right now. Now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Okay, we are back. And for those watching on YouTube, you will notice that I'm pulling up our lovely Mike Matheson meter. There's not a lot to go in Matheson's favor in this one. It's a tragic Mike night, and I'm going to point. It's a sub 1 from Mike Matheson. He was maybe not to blame for the first 3 goals of the game, but he certainly wasn't absolved of any criticism on those plays. A lot of them, he makes the wrong read, he makes the wrong play. I think the Robert Thomas goal, which I believe is the third St. Louis goal, Matheson gets a little bit of a pick. The Blues set a pick on him, as every team in the National Hockey League does now. It's just part of the game, unfortunately, unless your team tries to do it, in which case it's a penalty. That's just how it works. But it wasn't enough of a pick where I thought that it should have stopped Matheson from making the right play. I think that he had enough time to reset. He saw Robert Thomas line up for the shot, and instead of closing the gap, he kind of stopped, like to respect that he might try to skate by him instead of just shooting the puck, which is what he ended up doing. It was a very awkward looking play for Matheson, even though he did get a slight bit of interference on that play. But here's the thing, and I thought about making this a why you're wrong segment, but I don't want to do that because I don't think on a night like tonight people are wrong about Mike Matheson. He had a bad game. The thing I want to, I guess, remind folks of, and maybe just provide a little bit more perspective on this. On Saturday night against the Colorado Avalanche, Mike Matheson, like Nick Suzuki, was matched up against the Nathan MacKinnon line and matched up against Kel McCarr all night. 5-on-5 all night. The penalty kill, especially the penalty kill in overtime, Matheson got those minutes. And they didn't score. They had no points between the two of them. McCarr and MacKinnon were shut out. And before that, Matheson had played some very strong games defensively. We can go back to the Oiler game when they were out on the West Coast, and he was matched up against McDavid all night and did an admirable job against the game's best player. I just struggle with this idea that when those games happen, Habs fans are silent. They don't say a word about how Mike Matheson has been instrumental in them getting points. Because in games like those, he was. Those are Colorado. They could not afford to give up any other goal before getting to overtime in order to get them the 1 point that they so desperately needed. A guy like Mike Matheson was incredibly important in that game. And I find that I can't think of another player that since coming to Montreal, it just becomes so incredibly disrespected by the fan base. I I know Mike Matheson isn't playing in the role that he really ought to be. He shouldn't be a number one. He shouldn't be a number two. He probably fits best on a second pair. But given the situation that he's in, he's performing admirably. Yes, he has nights like this. What I find a bit of a cop-out after a night like this from Habs fans is that point to a defenseman who had a great night on Tuesday against the Blues. Yeah, of course. Matheson was on for those goals against. Was anybody else spectacular? I know Hudson had a point. He was okay. There wasn't a lot of guys standing out in a positive way in that hockey game. And it's just, I know he's on for the goals against, and we all just have daggers for this guy. And I think people will realize once he's gone how valuable he has been to this team. I know he's got a year left and people are running him out of town already, which is, I disagree with that on principle. Because again, the idea that people who listen to this show every day, our everyday listeners, we love you. You know that our thoughts on this are, okay, if you are getting rid of Mike Matheson, who is taking those minutes? Right now, is it Lane Hudson? You can't put Lane Hudson out there and expect him to shut down Nathan McKinnon and shut down Connor McDavid. Is it Caden Gooley? Maybe, but unfortunately, at this point in Caden Gooley's career, we can't expect him to be there. He has, and it's not chronic injury issues. I'm not going into that, but he just hasn't been healthy. It's impossible to know if he can handle a full NHL season as that kind of player. So if you are getting rid of Mike Matheson, who's your replacement? And until we have one, running him out of town makes this team worse. So I'll leave Matheson there. We do have to talk about Sam Montembeault, who this was a Sam Montembeault game in that he made a ton of saves early on from up close, some really high danger chances. And then the Montembeault recipe for getting scored on is just taking shots from as far away as you can. Now, a lot of those were through traffic. I think it was the first goal, the Kyrou goal. I think every skater that was on the ice that wasn't Kyrou was in front of him. There was no chance he saw that puck. The second one was a deflection. Holloway deflects it. It's a wrist shot from deep, but Holloway deflects it and it goes in. But then he starts to give up some that he needs to stop. The Thomas goal where Matheson gets picked a little bit, that's one where I think Montembeault needs a save. And then later on in the game, he gets pulled after the fifth goal. Broberg, he shot it right at Montembeault's glove and it still goes in. He ends up getting pulled after that. Dobish comes in, and it all leads to the point that they don't need to be playing Montembeault as much as they have. And I think the reason for that is he hasn't been good enough to warrant being ridden like this. Yes, he makes a lot of big saves, but he also gives up a ton of stinkers, a ton of goals where you go, man, we needed a save on that one. The last few games, he has spotted the other team a goal or two every night. And you can't have that if this team is trying to stay in a race. You need to keep Montembeault fresh. This was his fifth straight start. They don't need to be doing that because Jakub Dobiš has proven nothing to give Marty the idea that he can't handle this. His first career start was against the reigning Stanley Cup champions and a game he shut out the Florida Panthers. And I just feel like Marty is really nervous to go to the backup. He's going to have to. I think Dobiš gets that game against Philadelphia on Thursday. We probably go back to Montembeault on Friday for the game against the Carolina Hurricanes. And if that goes poorly for Montembeault, you're probably going back to Dobiš on Sunday afternoon against the Panthers, a situation and a game we already know Dobiš can handle. So, Montembeault, I don't know if he's quite losing the net right now. If this team were to make the playoffs, he's the starter. It's not a question. That's going to happen if Montreal is in the playoffs. But they don't need to be riding him to this extent. They can they can trust Jakub Dobeš to step in there and make a save. That's all they need. They don't need a goalie to come in there and stand on his head. They just need a save. And right now, Montembeault is giving them a lot of these really high quality saves. And, he's getting scored on some plays that he can't stop and some plays that he should. The recipe for scoring on Montembeault is to shoot from distance, not only because he can give up a soft one from distance, but if you get traffic and he can't see it, he's not going to stop it. That's not Montembeault's fault if he can't see it for the most part, but it's still going to go in. And if you shoot from distance, maybe it changes direction. That's not Montembeault's fault, but that's how you score against Sam Montembeault. So the book on him seems to be out that teams should feel very comfortable just letting the puck fly from deep. And a lot of that is not up to Sam Montembeault. If the Canadiens want to block the shot, they block just as much, if not more shots than any other team in the league. You either have to block it or get out of the way and clear the way. Get guys out of Sam's way. At least put your goalie in a position where you can say, hey, we gave you the best shot to make that save and you didn't make it, and you did, and we'll live to fight another day. So those are the two, I think, biggest scapegoats from the game against St. Louis. I'd be shocked if their poor play continued. They're very proud guys. I think they'll react the way that they need to. And if they don't, the Canadiens are probably not better, are probably not, headed for an extra couple of games in April. That's just, these guys are too important to this team for them to survive the issues that these players are having. But hopefully they're able to recover from those and we're able to move on and play some playoff games in April, which will be valuable not only to those guys, but to everybody on that roster. All right. One more thing I want to cover in this one, in our third segment, I want to talk about the fourth line. It's a sort of an identity line for the Montreal Canadiens. And right now they've sort of lost their identity, and we'll get into that in just a minute. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee. But I got tired of settling for grocery store brands or, anything else that just wasn't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, this coffee is next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the US, bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 top roasters. Their experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or you know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. I'm a coffee novice. I took their quiz, and in under a minute, they matched me with a roast that was fresh, smelled incredible when it came in the mail, and it tasted even better. I was never really sure what kind of coffee I liked. Now I do. I know what to look for, and I know that Trade has it, and it's an easy way to get my new favorites. The subscription makes it easy. No more last-minute grocery store runs, or you wake up in the morning and you're out of coffee, and now you have to stop somewhere on your way into the office. It's coffee right to your door. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. They will replace it until you get the coffee that you want. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/lockedonnhl for 40% off your first order. drinktrade.com/lockedonnhl. All right. Final segment here on Locked On Canadiens. Thanks so much for tuning in today. It's always tough after those tough losses, but we really appreciate that you guys tune in. We try to make this interesting for you and give you our perspective on the losses. If you're tuning in today from wherever you are, thank you. We really appreciate it. The last thing I wanted to touch on here is the fourth line. And I find it's very silly in a lot of circumstances, talking about a lot of teams, to devote a lot of time and energy into talking about a line that in most circumstances on most teams probably doesn't play 10 minutes a night. The Canadiens' fourth line is not that. Not only do they play a significant amount, and they play, all three of the guys on that line play some variation of special teams, whether it's Armia and Evans on the penalty kill or Emil Heineman getting second power play wave minutes. They are a valuable trio to Marty St. Louis. When this team was playing at their best, before Four Nations, before Emil Heineman got hurt, that line was an identity line for the Montreal Canadiens. It kind of, along with the Gallagher, Dvorak, and Anderson line, it really established that the Canadiens are going to beat you with their bottom six. And that could be a recipe for success in the playoffs, but they got to get there. And right now, the fourth line is just they don't seem to have the same type of success. Whether it's getting in on the forecheck, they're certainly not scoring at this point. That might be regression. Jake Evans was never going to keep scoring at the rate that he was scoring at for a while. Emil Heineman hasn't scored since he came back from his injury. And we know Yoel Armia is dealing with some kind of ailment. He sat out a couple of days with, I believe, an upper body injury. I believe it was a hand injury, his left hand, which is pretty important, especially as a forechecker getting in and trying to, dig the puck out on the wall and, get the puck to the middle of the ice. You're probably a little apprehensive to go do that if you're experiencing a lot of pain. The other issue, I think, and I think it leads to the Canadiens, the issue of the Canadiens' poor starts. Marty loves to start that line. It starts more often than not. It started on Tuesday against the Blues. It did not start against the Avs. That was the first line that started against the Avs, but against the Islanders, same thing. The fourth line started that game. They start more games, they start the game more often than not. And that was for a reason. It allowed, if the Canadiens would win that opening draw, they would chip the puck in deep, and that line would get to work and set the tone early that the Canadiens were going to outwork you. They were going to put the puck in your zone and take it away from you over and over and over and over again. And now that line is sort of not able to do that, that tone isn't able to be set. The first line might be able to play like that. I know the third line can, the Dvorak, Anderson, Gallagher line. I'd almost want to see them start games more often because I think that they can bring and are still bringing to a certain extent what the fourth line used to. And right now, the fourth line just isn't bringing that. And I don't know if that's just, I don't know if they are to blame for the starts that the Canadiens have, but they're certainly emblematic of the problem, right? The fact that line starts almost every game, and the starts as of late have been the biggest problem for the Canadiens. They get behind the 8 ball early, and they either have to have some kind of miracle comeback, or they get run out of the building like they did against St. Louis. Thankfully, we haven't seen much of that, but we now know that is an option moving forward. We kind of forgot that could happen. So that line needs to figure it out. They need to figure out why they're struggling. If it's due to injury, I don't really know that there's much they can do because they're not going to put Pezzetta in. I know people have sort of suggested that when Gouli is ready to come back, maybe you go 11 forwards and 7 defensemen. Marty hates that. He does not want to do that. It messes with the flow of the rest of the lines. It messes with ice time. It messes with, chemistry among lines. He does not like to do that. So, the idea here needs to be that, the Canadiens are able to figure this out in a way that they keep 12 forwards and 6 defensemen on their roster. They can't do 11-7. It's not a reality for Marty. It's not a reality for this team. And we still have to figure out if Gouli comes back in that instance, who is coming out of the lineup. I don't think we learned anything in this game as far as who should come out. I can already hear some of you typing, it should be Matheson coming out. It will not, and it should not be Mike Matheson coming out of the lineup for Caden Gouli. That does not solve much unless he's injured, which doesn't look like he is. So there's a lot of questions here to be solved over the coming days for the Montreal Canadiens. They are going to stay on the road, I should say, and head into Philadelphia, a team that got their butts kicked on Tuesday night as well. And they're going to try to figure out if they can start games better. They can, not fall behind the 8 ball immediately. And I think that it's just going to start. It has to start from the first shift. And I think that if the fourth line isn't giving it to you, you have to go to somebody that will. Maybe start the second line and just give Alex Newhook the puck and see if he can go end to end. Because if he can go end to end and set up some kind of scoring, draw a penalty, do something, it's a positive shift. The first shift, the reason why Marty plays that fourth line is because he knows he can get a positive shift out of them. Right now, he's not getting a positive shift out of them, so they need to find some other way to get that. And if it's not going to be the fourth line, they have to Have to give somebody another chance. But that we will see that play out on Thursday. For now, let's hit our trivia and then head out of here. Last episode, when I was covering the weekly forecast, I talked about Dustin Tokarski, who has played games in the National Hockey League this season with the Carolina Hurricanes. I couldn't believe it either. I looked back at his first NHL game. He started his NHL career with the Tampa Bay Lightning, making his first start on January 16th, 2010. This would be a losing effort to the Florida Panthers. Two former Montreal Canadiens scored in that game, one for his team, one against him. Who are they? Good Sport had it first, Super Rain second. Alex Tanguay scored for the Lightning. And one-time Montreal Canadian Brian Allen, who played, I believe, 5 games with the Montreal Canadiens, one of Bergevin's big, beefy defensemen that he brought in, also scored against Dustin Tokarski in that game. So Good Sport and Super Rain with the answers there. As always, appreciate you guys playing along with that game. Today's question. When I think of the St. Louis Blues and the Montreal Canadiens, I think of 2 players, Yaroslav Halak, and I think of Lars Eller, guys who were traded for one another coming out of that 2010 playoff run. Former Hab, Blue, and Stanley Cup champion Lars Eller played his final season with Frölunda Hockey Club in 2008-9 before making the jump to North America. On that Frölunda team, he played with this future Norris winner. Who won the Norris on that 2008-9 Frölunda team eventually in his NHL career? He obviously didn't win the Norris from Frölunda, but he did end up winning the Norris. If you know that player, put it in the comments. Send it to us via email, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. We'll shout you out on the next episode of the show and let everybody know just how smart you are. And that's going to do it for us today on this episode of Locked today. Bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are also available on Amazon Fire TV. On your free Fire TV channels app, click the Montreal Canadiens logo in the hockey section, and you can watch all of our episodes there as well. We're everywhere that you guys can find social posts, Bluesky, Twitter, or not Twitter anymore, sorry, Bluesky, Instagram, TikTok, Locked On Canadiens, and all of those places. LockedOnCanadiens@gmail.com for our email. Send us your mailbag questions. We do a mailbag every Friday. We'd be happy to answer your guys' question and let you guys participate in that area of the show. You can follow me on Bluesky at Maybe It's Ian. You can follow Laura, if you'd like to, at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you guys tomorrow.